Hi, everyone, and welcome to a special edition of Unique Peace. I am so excited to have the lovely Karen Garvey on. She is a conduit for universal messages to come through, and she's going to explain what that is. Most of us would associate that with coaching. Whether that's a life coach or spiritual coach, but it's much more than that. And Karen is going to share what that is and how she helps that find her peace in her practice as well as her clients and everyday life. So join me in welcoming Karen Garvey.
Hello. So good to be here. It's great to
How
see
are
you.
you this I am so excited to have you on. This has been some time in the making. As you know, Karen, you know my other half, Michael, who
Yes,
I've known
yes,
him for a
yes,
while.
yes. Yeah.
And so glad to finally be able to meet you and connect with you in this way. So, um, as I tried to explain, you are a conduit for universal
Right.
messaging. So, kind of walk us through how your life took that turn.
Okay. Yeah. And you and I were talking briefly before we went live, and it's a tricky situation because like English language doesn't really have enough adjectives or words to describe things of a spiritual nature. So we're just kind of spending our time now trying to make words up as we go along to describe some of the most deep and meaningful things that are in existence. You're doing it, I'm doing it. And I like the quiet healer. You hit something there. It's fantastic, but it's always just a play on words. But what happened for me is I worked in I have an MBA and I was working in business, and I also didn't have a great childhood. So somehow, some way, I was like seeking happiness, and I didn't really have a compass for it, though. I didn't really know how to go about that because I was very, very left brain. But on the morning of 9/11, 2001, I live an hour from Manhattan, but I still experienced what was happening at the World Trade Center simultaneously, like in my mind's eye. And it obviously changed my trajectory. And I might have been like on an edge for a while before that happened because things happened very, very quickly after that. And the connection of consciousness being able to travel beyond the body and the knowingness of that and learning how to direct it became my own personal path to discovering how to be happy. So I've always forewent experts and reading up on whatever philosophies were present, because to me, once I figured out how to open up this conduit and keep it as clear as I possibly can, and then I prefer that to be my source rather than regurgitating things that other people have told me. So for me, this is what works, and that's why I use the term conduit.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And I didn't have a great childhood either. So as you touch upon that, we are always kind of striving to find a peace or a happiness.
Right.
And so when you kind of veered in the direction of where you're at now,
Mhm.
have you found that it has helped you become more peaceful or put that side of your life as I accept it, it happened, and now I'm moving forward?
Oh, without a doubt. And I'm not one that says that when you discover or recall or know something that was challenging, that you should then spend decades peeling it apart and keep looking for the next wrong way that it has affected your present. The stronger idea is to identify it and then reframe it in a way, depending on what the incident is or incidents or even the whole of the childhood, reframe it in a way that can support who you innately are, who you want to be, and redefine yourself and your possibilities from this moment on. Now, I find, I say this over and over again to people when they are still in the throes of fully suffering from things that happened when they were children. At some point, you have to say, listen, you just, how old are you? You're 47, you're 63, you're 27. You just gave up 27 years of your life. You just gave up 64 years of your life to your parents' challenges. Now you deserve to be born into the whole of your entire life, right? And it's just a good way of thinking about it, that we don't want to give up any more time to that, just the time necessary to reframe it, understand it, and know that it wasn't your fault.
I like looking at it that way. I've always been one personally to look at it as what did it teach me? And it took a long time to come to that point. What did it teach me? And how did it shape
And I
who
think
I
that's the
am?
reframing how you're looking at it. And that's it. What's the benefit? What did it teach me? Those are essential. You're right. You're absolutely right.
And I just want to take a moment. We were just talking about Michael, so you want to take a moment to say hello because he's with us right now, watching us on Facebook.
Oh, hello. Hello, Michael. That's so cool.
So I like the reframing it. And when you help yourself or others kind of reframe it, can you kind of explain how that might work in any scenario where we're very uncomfortable?
Right. Yeah. It comes from, there's a philosophy behind most of what we do. And it's something that I heard from guides when I started to learn how to speak with them. Even though I had my experience of an opening on 9/11, 2001, the real conversation and the real meat of it all, when I understood I could communicate with non-physical sources, didn't start until 2005. But during a few years of learning and growing with them, they taught me some basic principles that help us to, again, reframe our experiences and perhaps see them differently. And the one that really kind of turned me on to a whole new way of being is a term that I use all the time, which is that everyone is doing the best that they can within their level of awareness. I find that if we say everyone is doing the best they can, that leaves people feeling like, well, he should have known better. Obviously, that's wrong. But so the whole of the story is not doing the best they can. It's doing the best they can within their level of awareness. How much was taken away from that person when they were young, that they no longer have access to their internal wisdom? Their level of awareness is based on the specificity of their childhood. So we can't heal them. We can't change who they are as adults, but within who they are and what their experiences were, they're doing the best they can within that. Right. And so no one who has an optimal childhood where we are feeling loved and supported, but also guided, can actually be in a position to make someone else a victim later in life. So that's the chain that just keeps going on and on and on and on and on. So when I started to understand that my parents did the best that they could with what happened to them in their childhoods, it took away all of the personal effects of it. That it wasn't because I am not worthy. It wasn't because of me being inadequate. It's not because I'm flawed. It's because this chain just keeps perpetuating until someone breaks it.
Right. I I agree with that. And all of and everything that it's taken a long time. I'm in my 40s. So it's taken a while to get to a point of where it's like, okay, because so many strange things happened to me as a child. I knew very early that I was different. I just didn't know why. If that makes any
Yes.
sense. And I find that a lot of people that happens to.
Yeah.
Like, like you were saying, you didn't have your real awakening until 9/11, 2001, and you didn't have your real conversations until 2005.
Right.
I was
Exactly.
having those conversations much earlier, having no idea what's going on. I just had a bunch of imaginary friends.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Oh, I get that. Yeah.
I don't
I
knock kids
totally
with
get that.
imaginary friends. I'm like, hope they're hope they're good to you.
But probably didn't have an environment in which it was encouraged. So you're lucky you were able to hold on to it and not lose that connection.
I think that's what saved me. I think
Yeah,
that's one of
no
one
doubt.
of the things that had kept me alive.
I
I'm
would
not
agree
gonna.
with you on that. No doubt. No doubt.
There's, there's certain points in our lives, and I'm sure you have them as well, where it's like that could have been a turning point in a totally different direction, and just
Yes.
straight
Yes. Yeah.
making swerves and curves towards the
Yeah.
light.
Yeah. It's sort of like after a shipwreck. It's like one piece of driftwood wanders by and you hold on to it long enough and it brings you into the shore. And your connection is what that driftwood was. It might have been cold and wet and scary and lonely, but at least it got you to the shore so that you could begin your own life.
Yes, and it sounds like you had a similar story or something along those
Yeah,
lines.
yeah. I didn't have a connection. I had almost the opposite, where anything that was perceived as being, non-scientific or academic, it was really, shut down in my house. So I had almost the opposite. I was just entirely left brain and academically oriented. And but that actually became my buoy, because if I did well in school, then I'd get an accolade from a teacher, or I'd get 100, or someone would sing my praises. So it's weird looking back on it. Like, how on earth could that make me think I was a worthy person? But by the standards of public school education, it made me more worthy than others, right? And it
Exactly.
and it saved me through that, because I had something that I had someone telling me I was okay.
Right. And it sounds like you're the chain breaker. And I
Yes,
know that I'm a
yes,
chain breaker, you're a chain breaker.
yes,
So
yes.
being a chain breaker
Oh,
and looking at it differently,
yeah,
kind of walk us how you had that pivotal chain breaking moment where it was like, I don't care what my friends, family, or anybody thinks. This is what I've decided to do.
yeah. Um, I remember hearing, like, before this part of my journey started, I would hear things like, do what you love and the money will follow. And, like all of these sayings that were like posters hanging in your middle school room and all this kind of stuff. And none of it meant anything to me. And I had a good enough career in business and went that route in corporate America. But it wasn't until I stumbled upon this that I understood, like, what you're talking about. Like, this is unstoppable. This isn't a decision. This is it's a sharing. It's just an inner knowingness and a knowledge where you just want to invite people in to be happy, because you don't want people to struggle the way that you did, right? So, that's the idea, is to just continue to help people get to the point where they're connected to whatever their inner compass is, whatever their inner guideposts are, again, so that they can find that while they're reframing what happened to them, and realize that it happened to them and they weren't responsible for it. No. And then just start to build from there. There's a lot of, if someone is really reframing their past, there's a lot of exercises in getting to know yourself, right? But what were you then? You were like either the family peacekeeper, or the family rebel, or the family do-gooder, or the pleaser. So you wore an identity that wasn't the true nature of your being, but you kept that with you because it worked. And then you find out, wow, I'm actually not a people pleaser. And then you start to say, well, if I'm not a people pleaser, then what am I? I'm allowed to actually make decisions that make me feel good. I'm allowed to follow an interest or a curiosity. I'm allowed to do something that wasn't told to me should be done, even in terms of, my career, or child rearing, or, hobbies. And that's what it is. It's like getting to know yourself, the stuff that's been suppressed for so long as you were surviving, that you have to get acquainted. And it can be very, very scary to get to know yourself again. It really can. And when I say again, I mean pretty much like for the first time in
Right.
your adult life, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's Gwen Stefani has that song, Let Me Reintroduce Myself.
Who is the song?
It's Gwen Stefani, Let Me Reintroduce
Oh,
Myself.
that's such a great phrase. Yes, that's a great, great phrase. Yeah,
And
that works.
she's not someone I would normally listen to, but that song caught my ear, and I was like, in the title alone, I mean, let
Yes,
me
I
introduce
like
myself.
that a lot. Uh-huh.
Her identity has been tied to so many things that
Yes,
she's who I am. This is who I get to be.
yes, yes. Yep.
It's
Yeah.
beautiful. And as you're rediscovering who you are and reframing life, how do you learn how to define peace for yourself? How do you define peace?
It's a great question. Um, it's when you get to the point that you can observe life and not have to be in the throes of other people's struggling and suffering, not because you're not compassionate or kind, but simply because you have comprehension that everything is purposeful and that they are where they are in their journey, and that we don't have to judge where they are. So therefore, we don't have to fix where they are. So there's always going to be chaos outside of us, at least in our earth life. Hopefully, maybe if we come back in let's say, 100 years, maybe we come back, the chaos will be behind us and we will have hit that, global enlightenment phase. But in the meantime, it's just so important not to get pulled into other people's stories and dramas, whether they're on the news or they're local, and to choose without guilt to be free of those struggles while you make decisions day after day after day of how you want to live. And I'm not saying it means don't help anybody, but we're not going to help every person that we're choosing to suffer with or for. So don't suffer, but just choose where you want to help, and help where it feels unstoppable and a natural extension of what you can truly offer. And I have had clients over the years who really confuse the words calm and peace. Calm is something they associate with boring. And that's not necessarily what peace is. Peace is that the struggle is over, and that in every day you can feel connected to something that feels worthy and important and special and worth being here for, and worth loving. Or calm, maybe you want to be calm, but you don't have to be calm to be peaceful.
No, you don't. Thank you. Thank you. I try and help people understand that. Sometimes it's like I'm peaceful at rock concerts, but
Oh.
that's not a calm environment. I mean,
Exactly. Yeah. So it's just a place. And I think, I hear a lot when people are doing meditations and things like that. You hear people say, where's your happy place? Go to your happy place. Whatever we perceive as our happy place, it's probably because it's bringing us to our place of peace. And the object is to say, when I can go walk in the woods and I can go trail walking and look at mushrooms and, watch ferns unfurl, and maybe that's my happy place. But I can also achieve that state of being and consciousness when I'm not in the forest and I'm not on the trail. And that's when you have attained a state of peace, that you don't have to necessarily be there. Even if that ignites it and brings it to a higher level, it's not essential for your sense of peace and well-being.
That's true. And that kind of brings us to the next question of what brings you peace? What brings Karen Garvey peace?
For me personally, it's just not something I did through my whole career up until this part of the career path, but it is about being with nature, doing things that are artistic, doing things that are creative. Those are the things that really make my heart sing. Nature's a huge part of my life. I just find that nature never lets me down because it always makes sense. And when you're really connected and you're vibrating high, I feel like it's even more incredible to see how nature responds to you, and how more magic happens in nature right in front of you, almost because it's now aware that you're in the zone of that state of being, and so I just see the pleasure of it. It's actually even a tool I use. Like if I just used this example in a class the other day. So like one morning I had 3 crummy things happen within a half hour, right? The
Oh
coffee
no.
spills, it's all over the entire floor, but I have a session, so I got to clean it up. And, 3 things by 9. And you're like, oh, so I immediately went back to like an old way of thinking. I'm like, well, this day's going to suck. Right. But then I caught myself and I'm like, no, because then this day will suck. I got to nip that in the bud and get back in the driver's seat. So this is something that I do periodically when I'm like, well, that was silly. I say I was standing by this really big window in the downstairs part of my house, and I just said, you know what, nature, give me a win. And that's all I did. I said, nature, give me a win, because I wanted to break that energy. And with this, Janice, it was like the weirdest thing where I live. And I've lived here for a long time. I've never, ever, ever seen a goose or geese. They just aren't here. And as I said, nature give me a win. It was like an animation from a Disney movie. This goose just came and flew in right in front of the two big windows, landed on the ground, and in front of me, looked his head at me and went, "You talking to me? You talking to me?
I love
What's going on?" And then, he stayed for maybe, 5 to 10 minutes, and then he flew away. And it's weirdly magic, but I probably have 20 more stories like that. So it feels like fiction, but you create that fiction when you really believe in and see how miraculous life can be. So for me, nature doesn't let me down.
That's beautiful. And I'm sure we all have similar stories like that. I
Yes.
definitely have a few stories like that myself. And it's like, okay, okay.
Yeah.
Most of the time, usually it's like,
I'm in my head again. And thank you, Goose. High five me with your little webs.
full strut. I love
Yeah.
it. So I know you do retreats and everything. So there are times where this is a good question to pose to you because you just brought up nature. And how do you help others find peace?
Yeah. I do a lot of destination seminars, and they're multi-day. The longest I've done is, I think, 5 days. And depending on how far away we go, they're longer. Like the farther from, I have most of my majorities in the tri-state area of my client base. But in every destination seminar we do, I always include nature in a way that it's connected to the theme of the weekend or the experience, so that people who haven't figured out that you can actually feel good and comfortable and have really new experiences in nature, that they get to be a part of it, and perhaps even see that it's something that they can do when we're not all together. So depending, every multi-day seminar has a theme, and depending on the theme, we'll do thing after thing after thing. We always create something as well. So we always make something, and that something is infused with the philosophy and the metaphor of the weekend, and it's a takeaway. We usually let something go and forego something in some kind of a way as well. So it's really transformational. But the key is to leave people with tools, because anybody can have a good experience for 3 or 4 or 5 isolated days where they're away from whatever their own personal pressures are. But the key really is, how can you take these experiences that you're having and start to infuse them into your day-to-day life? Because your day-to-day life, whether it's your job, your family, or whatever else you're experiencing, they're not on this weekend. They're not here with us, and they're not making the active changes. So I leave people with lots of hard takeaways of things to do. And they're not going to be all time consuming either. It's going to be a little nod in the morning, a little thing at bedtime, a little this, and just little reminders to retrain the brain's processing of their day-to-day experiences.
So again, that reframing.
Yes. Yes. I don't necessarily select like what parts get lit up that I focus on and pay attention to, but I've noticed that over the decade plus that I've been doing this, there seems to be in a propensity to head towards like how the brain functions. Do I have any background in it? Absolutely not. But whenever I do bring something in about the functions of the brain and how we can retrain it, science shows it to be true before or after I bring it through. So I do work on exercises a lot that are helping us to create a new habit with the way our brains are working. And that helps people to see that, a lot of people feel like failures if they break a cycle that's good for them. But if you don't see yourself as the only cause for breaking a cycle, and you realize that your brain is a part of this equation, and it's just a matter of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and do it 21 times, do it 30 times, and then you'll not feel like you're flawed. You'll see that it can change. It got to the way it is, and it can get to the way you would like it to be. And that's really helpful, because we spend so much time beating up on ourselves. We don't need to add any other reason to beat ourselves up.
No, no. And we have a lot of outside pressures contributing to that, that you hear all of that coming at you in so many ways. And it, it goes back to the smaller the circle, the closer to the truth and the farther away, you're going to get a lot of misinformation, confusion, and lies. Personally, I don't watch the news anymore. I'm
Yeah.
probably way out of the loop, but I also know that everyone is lying, so I really don't know the truth anyway. So I'll take all the information in and make my own decision.
Right.
And that's the truth of anything. There are times where, going back to like a corporate environment, when things are off.
Yes.
So coming in and finding it's like your boss will yell at you and tell you that everything is your fault, when really it's just they needed someone to take it out on, and you happen to be the.
Absolutely. Definitely.
So taking it back and saying, okay, this is my piece. That had nothing to do with me.
Absolutely. And to be able to identify that is so helpful. And you have to have developed enough self-love to be able to identify it and not allow other people to make their situations your fault or your problem.
Right. And it can be difficult. I mean, even now, just the mere fact that we are, having this human experience, not 100% perfect. So it's like, it's hard every day. And
Yes.
uh,
Yes. Yes.
even when it comes to, we were talking before the broadcast about parenting, and that you can have. I'm the oldest of four, and I only have one at this moment. So if I were to have another one, that child would be completely different than my son.
Yes.
And
Yes.
no kid is the same, so you have to respond to them differently. So my mom has four kids, none of us are the same, and all of us are unusual. So it's like, but as you know, when I was younger, it was like I was angry and upset because I'm the oldest and I had to help with the other three, and parent, because you can be very resentful in those teenage years because you're trying to find yourself, and then at the same
Yes.
time you've got siblings and they're annoying and what have you. Then you come and you become a parent.
Yes.
And as you and I both noted, we're chain breakers. It's like everything I said I wouldn't do as a parent, I have not done. But
Right.
everything I now understand why my parents were the way they were.
Yes. Yes.
And
Yes.
there's a peace within that. It's kind of like,
Yes.
and you just look at them and they're old and set in their ways.
Yeah. Yeah. I comprehension of the cause and effect of things, I find, really brings a lot of peace. Yeah.
So, and so as you're helping people find peace and connect with themselves and reframe their past and the way it affects their present, and well, not affects, but how they allow it to affect their present, reframe it so it doesn't, or
Mhm.
at least take away the positive rather than focus on the negative.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Uh, what are some tools in your toolbox per se that you could like pull out quickly if you're at a retreat or in a session and things are like, this person needs, you would mention you give them concrete tools, but what can you give them in that moment to help calm them
Yeah.
down?
Like, well, one of the it I think it's just one of the most important tools of all, and it really is intuition. Just I give people just some fast, fun exercises so that within a short period of time they can realize they are intuitive, even if they said, I'm not, I'm not, I'm not. And very quickly they see that they are. Because I find that when people see their own intuition and the interactive relationship between the energies that are non-physical and themselves, I feel that that really ignites hope, because then we know that we're not alone. And that's just such an important part of life, is to know that we're not alone and that we are connected to something that is supportive and helpful and here for us. So that would be my go-to, is to help people see deeply how intuitive they are.
I love that. I love that. And kind of flipping it to being in the throes of parenthood. There's a lot of us with kids. Sounds like you have a child, maybe similar age.
Right.
Uh, um, Now I know how I bring him peace, especially when we were talking about calming, calming him down and bringing him in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, what would you say would be in a toolbox for an adolescent, someone who's still trying to find themselves and they're not quite an adult, but they know they're not a kid they're not a kid anymore. And at that age, some kids will be responsive to intuition, but a lot are just trying to fit in.
Right. Right. Yeah. There's no doubt about that. I I'm so grateful that even before my 9/11 experiences, the one place where I had an innate connection to intuition, even though I didn't know I was intuitive, the way you did with your connection that you had all the way through childhood, I didn't know that any connection existed, let alone did I have one. But I was naturally intuitive with raising kids. I don't know how I got that lane, but I got that lane. So I remember when my first daughter was 13 and I hit that, ooh, yeah, you hear about this and you read about this and people are going to try to advise you through all of this. And I just remember my approach was like, whoa, I don't know who this is, but this isn't, my first daughter's name is Megan. I'm like, this is not Megan. And I was just so baffled by her behavior. I'm like, listen, do me a favor, whoever you are, go up to Megan's room and hang out there. And when you see Megan, send her back down. And I did that for like 3 days in a row. And I have to tell you, she never, ever, ever did that teenage stuff again after it. I guess because I didn't respond with an expectation that this was going to become a nightmare. And so that's basically what I did. I asked them, how did that make you feel? Instead of telling them how it made me feel. And that was a big part of it, you know? And then they think about it, how it made them feel. Right. And then it's like, well, is there anything that you might want to do about it? Or is there anything that you could have done differently, that you might do differently? So it was more about like questioning without judgment, to make the space that they could think it through on their own without me judging them or putting my ideas of should, must, need, have to, or what I expect of you. And like I said, I think that was just an intuition, and without a frame of reference for, optimal parenting, it had to be intuition. And I wasn't even rejecting my parents' techniques. I just had no techniques to applaud or to reject. Trying to figure it out. But there's such a tendency for us to want to smother our children to protect them from all of the harm and evils in life. But protecting them or keeping them isolated or not trusting them or teaching them to trust themselves is the absolute wrong thing that we can do for them. They have to learn how to be decision makers from a very, very young age, to giving a clerk a $10 bill when they're 6, to, figuring out how to turn the windshield wipers on in their first car when it's raining. We got to let them figure things out so they can trust that they can address situations as they arise.
That is very sound advice. I understand, and I also know
Yeah.
that there's a lot of parents that come from that. This is I told you to do this 10,000 times
Yeah.
versus do you want to live in this environment? That's a nice way of flipping it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. This works for a lot of people too. I notes work better than sometimes words, because words, they learn how to tune out. So my thing was, if I was working on a Saturday, I would put 3 Post-its on the kitchen counter. of what each of them needed to do, and there was no conversation about it. They were reasonable, right? They were reasonable expectations. The kids would go down and they would cross them off one by one, and at the end of the day, when I came home or whenever I came home, they were done. And if something wasn't done and somebody's like, hey, can you drive me to Jess's house? I would just say, well, how do you do with the note? Not in an accusatory way. And they'd be like, oh, well, is it okay if I just do this one thing tomorrow? And I'm like, well, that's going to be your one time to get a pass on it. And then I stayed with it. And it's interesting because it's the sense of having to convince them that makes us feel like we're asking for a favor of them, or it's our way and the only way. But when you just point out that we're a team, we just have to get this stuff done, and I'm doing this thing, which is going to work, and you're going to do these things. It takes away the right and wrong, or have to, or should, or need. We're a member of a team, and we got to work together. That's it. So it's letting go of that battle. It's just letting go of that battle.
Yes. And that's a battle that most parents want to win. I mean,
yeah. It's funny if you're put down a lot as a child, or you're disempowered. When you become an adult, sometimes you want to feel powerful. You want to have a voice. You want to feel like you own something that needs to regard you. And those are very natural and human feelings. You want to even do it right differently than your parents did. But it doesn't help. It helps to raise them to be thinkers, to be able to decide, to process, to emote, but in healthy ways. That's our role. Our role is to guide them, not to force them.
yes. It
Yeah.
is. Absolutely. It's very funny because the last election, not that I'm bringing up politics for any other reason than this is funny. The last election, because I was always raised to be an independent thinker. We
Okay.
had to be independent thinkers. And I try very hard with my own son to make sure he's an independent thinker. But
Okay.
I also have the battle of the chores. And I think that's a boy versus girl thing. Because I think if he was a girl and, people come over, this is what they see. He goes, well, nobody's coming over. And I'm like, okay,
Good
I have
answer.
to release you into the wild at some point in the next 2 years.
Yeah.
And I need to make sure that when I come and visit, it's safe.
And if you ever have a romantic partner long term down the road, I don't want to take the responsibility
Oh,
for
yeah.
the
This is all
choices you
him.
make.
This is all him. um, but he, the whole right and left. And so I made sure that it's like, okay, if you're following one, you have to follow the other because you can't just take sides and not know why you're taking a side.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Um, and I think that was one of the best things that has helped him is because now he doesn't just look at things one-sided. He'll take a look and say, wait a minute. Well, what does it mean over here?
Right. Yeah, that's
Um,
amazing. That's
it's
amazing.
eye-opening too.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah. Yeah,
he
that makes such a difference. It really does. It makes all the difference.
all the
Again,
difference.
that's a tool that they keep with them for life. It's not just an answer that they memorize. It's an active way that they can be in the world and be in the world for the whole of their lives.
And also not recently, about a year ago, he's in the BOCES program here in New York, and he was afraid to say, I don't want to go to college. He goes, what if I don't want to go to college? And I looked at him and go, then you'll go to VOTEC because you're not sitting on my couch. So he realized that there was options. It's like, I'm not going to be mad at you. I'd rather you figure out now that you're
Yes.
not a college kid, but
Yes.
still have to
Yes.
figure
Yeah.
out what you're going to do with your life.
Yes. Yes.
And so
Yeah.
that took some pressure off him, like, oh, she's not going to, because so many kids in his class are being forced to go to college. Like, I'm not going, my parents are making me. It's like, you
No.
don't have to go to college,
No.
but you got to figure out something.
Right. I agree. Yeah. I think that, um, the younger generations, they're obviously they have to navigate the world as it is today, but I think that they are showing more power to decide that just because things have been the same since the Industrial Revolution doesn't mean that we have to keep them the same. And they're feeling the freedom to choose. And if you look at it from, like, if we just landed here and we're 17 and we look at like the cost of college and our obsession with it and what kind of a life it, is going to guarantee versus not guarantee, like, it doesn't make any sense. And so maybe it is time to change the paradigms and flip everything and maybe start fresh. And who knows, maybe they'll grab the ball and run with it. Start fresh. Just because it was doesn't mean it has to be.
Right. And as my mom had actually has said, not every kid is made for college. And look at all the multimillionaires who never went to school.
Yes, beyond a shadow of a doubt. And I know an equal number of people who have $200,000 in student loan debt and are working for $15 an hour. So it goes both ways. It really does. But the idea of, continuing to pursue more education as a way to do better than your parents, that timing is over. It's over. It doesn't exist the way we knew it. So we have to figure out a new way.
Right. And in finding a new way and being allowed to,
Yes.
feeling like you're allowed to find a new way in your own way brings some peace. That is one of the ways where I know my son is at peace. Now he is responsible for doing the work, but
Yes.
he's at peace
Yes.
knowing that, okay, I'm not going to be forced to go to college. These are
Yes.
my, these
Yes.
are,
Yes.
there's a piece of that to that.
And if he
It's,
wants to change his mind at 25, he can. If he wants to
yeah,
change his mind at 42, he can. If he never wants to change his mind about it, then he doesn't have to.
yeah.
It's his life. It's his choice.
And I feel that that's very empowering for teenagers when they get to make that choice because there's some peace that that's like, okay, I
Yes.
made this choice.
I
Now,
totally agree.
living with the consequences or the results of those choices, that's all on them. So it's that comes to that point. But giving them the peace of mind, saying, I'm allowed to make that choice. Because
Yes.
there's so many choices they still can't make on their
Right.
own and graduate from high school at least.
Yeah, that's very, very true. And to get your nod of approval that you believe in his ability to choose, that's another takeaway for life that he'll keep with him. Right?
So absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
And in your own story with your daughter, it's like, I don't know who you are, but come back when you're you again. I wish that worked for my son, but it doesn't. Um,
I think you got to start it at the very first time. That was the
yeah,
key.
I was a little late at the
No
game.
going back. Yeah, I mean, remarkably, 3 for 3. None of them had um, troubling teenage years, and I'm really grateful about that. It's just one day at a time, and I think they have always felt and still do feel like I see them and I hear them and I listen and we have conversations. I don't just dictate or narrate.
Yes, that listening is also key. I do that. Sometimes I'm baffled by the things that come out of his mouth, but I just listen. Like, you did what?
You're allowed to be baffled.
Then you start to think, did I do that? Oh God, I hope not. You don't want to call home, find out, did I do that?
That's so funny. uh,
But also as adults who've had tumultuous childhoods or rough childhoods. Um, Hello, Regina. Welcome, Regina. Um, that power to talk and listen and be heard is also peaceful. And I'm
yeah.
frozen. Yeah, you hear me?
I can hear you, which is great because yeah, your image is frozen, but that's okay. You're right, and that's probably such an important reason why gifting that to our kids when they're younger is important because it's not as easy to gain it when we're older. The need to be heard and to feel heard. We also have to make sure that others are feeling the same thing, that they're feeling heard and understood, right?
Yes. Yes, that is key. We all want to be seen, heard, loved, and understood.
Yes.
And that I think brings a lot of peace to people when they do feel that way. When they feel, I've heard you, I've seen you, I value you. And it's like, thank you. And then you can reciprocate, and that brings peace to the situation.
Yeah. Oh, without a doubt. Without a doubt. Um, yeah, there's no doubt about it. It's amazing how something as simple as eye contact makes such a big difference when you're having conversations with people. Sometimes they just even react to that because it's not something they're accustomed to, right? We look through people or off to the side or over their heads. But for me, I still believe in warm handshakes and eye contact, despite even increasing germophobia. I think that people want to be, like you said, visible. The bottom line is everybody wants to be loved. You put that in there with visible and heard and understood and loved, but it all comes down to everybody wants to be loved. And sometimes we feel loved when we're heard, and sometimes when we're visible. But we all have the birthright to be loved. So it's a natural driver. It's a natural thing for us to be seeking, and winning back some modicum of self-love helps us know that we deserve it. And then we can seek it and we can get that. And then we can give it too, as well.
Yes. Yes. And the giving of love also brings peace to both sides.
Yeah, it does. There's no doubt. There's no doubt. Yeah.
So, before we close, I have an interesting question for you, a new question that has
Oh, okay.
been presented to me. What is your favorite thing about bringing peace to others?
I think it's just the just I feel so grateful when someone knows they deserve it. You know, I think that's basically it. It's actually, yeah, it's making me cry. I just feel so grateful when people know they deserve it. I really do.
Yes.
Everyone deserves to know that. Yeah.
Yes. I love that. I love that. And I want to thank you for helping me share this love and peace with others tonight. I want to thank you for sharing what brings you peace
Thank you.
and for answering that question.
Thank you.
Oops, it's supposed to come up. Nope, I
Yeah.
think I'm,
Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't work, but we're grateful that we can still hear you. See, you're heard.
I'm heard.
You may not be visible at this second, but you're heard. Yeah.
So, thank you, Karen. I appreciate
It
you
was
so
great
much.
spending this time with you, Janice. I really enjoyed it. And thank you so much for inviting me. You're doing great stuff out there. And I really believe that you're making a difference.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to put you back in the green room for a moment, and I'll be right back with you. I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight for this special edition of Unique Peace. Also want to remind everybody that on Sunday morning, I have Franz Stein from the International Association of Reiki, and he is a Reiki master teacher. He's an author. He is going to come on and talk about what brings him peace. So I'm looking forward to seeing you all then. And thank you so much for coming on and joining us.